that he filled was, one that wasn't even created last year at the University of Miami. But he and the board of trustees, they came up and made the decision that that's the kind of position that will not just make Miami a 9-win team this year and then fall off again, but it's going to a move that'll make sure that the culture is continuing to grow.
Bring a little more prestige back to the program, and credit Ed Reed for even wanting to do it, because a lot of guys in his stature, with the Hall of Famer, may say, "Hey, I'm too good for that to be back on the college sidelines." He's already went through the reins of being an NFL assistant, so a tip of him there for wanting to even take on that role.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you this question. Why do you think Miami's alumni, their former players, why do you think they are tied closer to their school than maybe some other, because it's well known that Miami has a very distinct, but also, what's the word I'm trying to say? They're very close to their former players. Why do you think it's more so like that at Miami compared to other schools?
Well, I think that's something that's been, pretty much planted in the seeds going back to the 80s.
Yeah.
And, and of course, someone may hear this and think that it may be a little bit biased, but I honestly don't see that kind of close knit from the alumni at any other program. I really don't see it at Alabama.
Yep.
I don't really see it at USC or Penn State or Michigan. It's really at Miami. It's only at Miami where you see guys like Michael Irvin and Warren Sapp at a UAB game, because they're there. And I think that I also believe that the players feel that the program needs it at this point in time because of what they've been going through the past decade plus. Like, hey, they need that alumni to come back and say, hey, this is still Miami. Because, of course, a lot of people are building their own outlook on Miami, because a lot of kids that come into college football now, they were not there when Warren Sapp was playing. They were not there. They were not even born when Ray Lewis was there, or even when Ed Reed was playing. They were toddlers. So I think the players, the alumni, still believe like, hey, we still need to help out the university by building the university to what we know it is. And that's why you still see them there to this day.
Yeah. Well, I want to make a comparison of this offseason between us and Florida State. You see Ed Reed, come in as the what's his title again? I can't think of it right now. I'm drawing a blank.
Affairs or
chief of staff.
Chief of staff.
Yeah. So he comes in as the chief of staff. I mean, it was a big headline when it happened, but if you think his role hasn't been glamorous. It's not like what he's doing is extremely glamorous right now.
What the hell is chief of staff anyway? Like, I don't.
Yeah. I mean, he's putting in work, in my opinion. Like I think he's doing dirty work because he loves the program, right?
Mm-hmm.
He's not. I mean, he's not a sideline coach. He's not furthering a coaching career, which we know he's interested in because he was with the Buffalo Bills last year.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not like this is a huge boon to his career. But if you contrast that with what happened with Deion Sanders at Florida State, like he threw his hat in the ring to be head coach. And when they spurned him, he went somewhere else.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So Ed Reed is willing to put in, he's willing to get his hands dirty and, like have a very unglamorous position to help fix the culture at the University of Miami, whereas Deion just wanted the lights, right?
Right. And to be honest with you, this may lead to a front office job for Ed Reed down the line.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. That's a good point. So, I mean, maybe that point isn't as strong, but I do think that's the difference, though, is Ed was willing to do whatever he had to do to make the University of Miami better, whereas Deion kind of just, he was Deion, right?
Yeah, I don't see those guys at Florida State games. I don't see those guys, if an Alabama alumni, they come to a game, more than likely it's either the Auburn game or the LSU game.
Yeah.
They're not there against Chattanooga State or whatever. They're there for the headline games. And like I said, you don't see that unless it's at Miami. Those guys are there all the time, man. So,
wow.
It's pretty amazing because, I've gone and covered a ton of practices and more often than not on more like at least one occasion a week, you're going to have at least some former players. It may not be a Hall of Famer, but
Right.
I mean, you'll get a lot of guys. Greg Olson sometimes stops by, and all these guys, and just having that influence and that, that feeling the love that they have for their alma mater. I'm sure it's a huge deal for Miami.
And don't downplay it, okay? Those kids that play in that Miami local area, they may not have been around to see Ed Reed or Andre Johnson or even Sean Taylor when they were at their height at the University of Miami, but they know who those names are. They know who Ed Reed is. They know who Warren Sapp is. Just playing in that Miami area, you may not see them, but that still carries. So yeah, those guys, they're I'm pretty sure those kids, their eyes widen when they see a guy like Michael Irvin walking out the room or something like that.
Well, a trend that I've noticed, and maybe it's kind of tailing off now, but for the longest time, it seems like most of these kids that grow up, like the biggest recruits in Florida, they grow up as Miami Hurricanes fans.
Right.
However, and that's because of the brand, right? Like, what's not to love about it? Like, you can see that brotherhood from a mile away. That's why I'm a Miami Hurricanes fan.
Right.
Is because I loved watching all the players meet up after the NFL games in the, on the logo to talk about being Hurricanes, right? That's what really drew me into the program.
Yeah. And that was also weird too. All these 5-star, 4-star local Florida products are Miami fans, but they leave and go to Alabama.
Yeah. And that's why we just if we can just make it a smart business decision for these kids to attend University of Miami, the recruiting will take care of itself.
It will.
Because really, I don't blame them. I mean, for the last 15 years, why would you go to Miami? Like, if you're Julio Jones, why would you go to Miami over Alabama? Or if you're Jerry Jeudy, or if you're
we could name these players for hours.
For hours, yeah.
Dalvin Cook.
Yeah, exactly. Like, what's the point though? You got these kids got to make a good business decision, and yeah, they can get noticed at University of Miami as well. But we haven't been even in the conversation to compete for a national title since 2005.
Hold on, can I ask a question to both you guys? Eric, let me ask you first. How different do you think Mark Pope's career would have been if he would have went to a place like Alabama?
Ooh.
Or Jeff Thomas?
Oh, wow. Geez. You know what? I'll be honest with you. A guy like Jeff Thomas, I don't think he would have lasted long at Alabama.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I think Saban would have gotten rid of him, probably year one somehow.
Yeah, you get one chance at Alabama.
You got one chance. He got numerous chances at Miami because, of course, to be honest with you, he probably was the best player on the field at certain times. Definitely the best receiver in the room, maybe. But I think if he would have went to a school like Alabama or Georgia, he wouldn't have lasted. As far as Pope goes, I really like Pope a lot coming out of high school. Love his skill set now. I also believe he'll still be sitting right now if he went to Alabama. You can't sit here and tell me, honestly, you can't sit here and tell me he would have started over Jerry Jeudy last year. Or he would have gotten more playing time than Henry Ruggs.
Or Jalen Waddle,
Like this year he's going to be starting over Waddle and Devontae Smith.
No, I'm sorry. And like I said, I love Mark Pope. I love his skill set. I love what he brings to the table. I love the fact that he stayed home. But if he would have went to schools like that, man, he would have been a 4-year reserve, to be honest with you.
Well, because I saw that tweet on the timeline a few days ago, and because I have the same thought as you do. A lot of these people are saying, if you put him in the right system, and I want to tell them, it's not just the system with some of these guys. You're not, you can't. Yeah. I think a lot of people, and I'm very guilty of this. I thought that this offense would make D. Wiggins and Mike Harley, 50, 60 catch guys and 800,000 yard receivers. And it's just because I thought it was the system, and it's not.
I thought it would have made Pope that type of receiver simply because it would have allowed him to be kind of sort of like what the James Prochet was for SMU, where you just dialed up plays just to get him in one-on-one matchups and use him in space.
Yeah.
I think what happened was, I think Lashley saw the run game take off a little bit more than he expected it to, and he said, hey, we got something here.
Mm-hmm.
And then he finally figured out and said, hey, you know what? Our best receiver is probably our tight end. So why don't we utilize the run to set up and elevate our passing game? Because we really don't have the guys at receiver. So I think that's probably what it is. And there's nothing wrong with that, to be honest with you. It's him seeing what's in front of him and him adapting to it. Something that Dan Enos didn't do, something that Mark Richt really did, honestly. So I'm fine with it, honestly.
Yeah. I was laughing to myself on Sunday because, Marsh and I have spent all off season talking about the Rhett Lashley hire, and we're like, our wide receivers are going to be great. I personally predicted that D. Wiggins would go near or over 1,000 yards. Because we were saying, like, there's no way that SMU's wide receivers are that much better than our guys. And then I was watching the Ravens-Eagles and saw James Prochet playing for the Ravens, and I was like, you know what? He was just that much better than all of our guys. So, I mean, I'm not going to fault any Canes fans for thinking that, because I did too. But I guess it's just kind of funny. Like, I guess Lashley just had better personnel than our current wide receiving core last season. So
reality kind of set in a little bit probably in the Clemson game. Honestly. Yeah. The Clemson game was like, okay, these guys are really not as good as we thought they were. They're good. Don't get me wrong. They're good. But they're not
elite.
They're not elite. There's no number one receiver here. And like I mentioned, Brevin Jordan is probably the best weapon in the passing game for him.
Yeah.
Which I'm okay with because of the fact that you have Brevin. You have the option. What other schools have the option of having literally two number one tight ends on the field at the same time?
Yeah, it's amazing.
That is what's key. That and having a run game that can really get you 200 yards if you really stick with it. To me, they can slide by this year without having an elite number one receiver, in my opinion. Just to get 9, maybe 10 wins, they can get by.
And I think that 9 wins without a number one receiver is very obtainable because we're putting up points and we're making it work without having a guy like. Let me ask you this: what has been the most what has surprised you the most in a good way about the Hurricanes this year, and then also what has been the most disappointing?
The fact that Lashley is not afraid to lean on that run game and to go deep in the depth chart with it. He's got three number one backs.
Yeah.
He's got Cam, he's got Knighton, he's got Chaney, and he's not afraid to use any of them. And that is what I like. You know, Cam Harris is a great back. He can definitely start in a number of programs, but I didn't want to see them, run him into the ground. Keep that rotation going. Keep that thing fresh. You can't sit here and tell me that it hasn't worked when Chaney is pulling off 5-6 yard carries in the fourth quarter.
Yeah.
So it's working. Keep that. Like it. Go ahead.
And, Robert Burns has played great. I mean, even into last season, he got a lot more run when Enos was here.
Right.
But, Robert Burns got a number of carries against Pitt. And, he's been good, too. I mean, I'd have a hard time believing that Robert Burns wouldn't at least be number 2 on the depth chart at Florida right now. So
and not our old running back who transferred to Florida.
Yeah.
How's he doing?
I think that's a thing where it's not just the system.
Yeah. Right. Haven't heard much from him since he left, but yeah. Again, the scheme is versatile enough to the point to where you can rely on the run game to set up the pass. A lot of people will look at this scheme and say, oh, it's all about throwing the ball 40, 50 times a game. Not necessarily. It's all about getting the right players in the right space at the right time and making the defense not anticipate what's coming. So what Lashley has in front of him right now, he says, I have a deep running